Hello, it's Phil and Heather, and we are here today to show you our favorite photos that we selected in 2020. I took I don't know how many photos. Took lots and lots and lots, hundreds and thousands of photographs, and I narrowed that down to about 75 or so. And Heather has started doing photography this year, so she has photos in this video as well, and I'm super excited about that. How many did you share on
16.
16? That's awesome, and some of Heather's are just amazing. I can't wait till you see them. A lot of them, if you follow the channel, you've probably already seen quite a few of these, and if you watch every single video, you've probably seen every single one of these because we tend to share our best work in the videos. But there's a lot of photos in here, 16 of Heather's, and I don't know how many of mine, 75 or 80. So I'm going to have to go through them pretty quickly so this video doesn't last, an hour. So if there's one that you want to look at a little bit more in depth, just hit pause, and then you can take a look at it. And without further ado, let's get started looking at our favorite photos of 2020. Here is one from January the 5th. I made this at home as we were taking down the Christmas tree. I used the Z6 and the 1973 Minolta 50mm f1.4. This is at Rainbow Falls. This was January the 16th, the hardest waterfall I've ever hiked to. Used the Z6 and the 24-70 f2.8G. And then on the 26th of January, this is the cypress trees that are growing near Harrison Bay State Park, and that time of year the water is down, so they're not in the water. I worked on panning blurs quite a bit this year, and this is one in downtown Chattanooga with the Z6 and the 50mm f1.8G that I made on February the 2nd. And also on that same day, I love this photograph that I made of Heather. We were downtown walking around doing street photography, and I made this portrait of her also with the 50 f1.8G. Now this shot is of Casey with the 85 f1.8G. This is February the 12th. We went to Knoxville, and I made this photograph of her on the campus of the University of Tennessee. And now we'll go south to Atlanta, Georgia. This was February the 15th with the Z6 and the 105 f2.8 macro lens of a fish at the Georgia Aquarium. And we made another trip back to Knoxville on the 23rd of February, and I like this street photography photo of this man walking at Market Square with the beautiful building in the background. And here is Casey and Heather in an alley in Knoxville on that same day, the 23rd. I like the way the wind was blowing through their hair. This is with the 85 1.8. And now this is a street photography photo that I made in downtown Chattanooga at f1.8, where a lot of street photography is at f5 or f8. Really love this shot. And later that night with the 50 f1.8, I did kind of a panning blur of this gentleman riding his bicycle in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So here we are on March the 1st, and as you can see, I have finally acquired my Z50, and I made this my favorite waterfall photograph ever of Greeter Falls with the kit lens, and then also using the 16 to 50 kit lens. Later on the 5th, I went to the Chickamauga Dam, and this is Tennessee River waves crashing over these rocks. Later we went to North Chickamauga Creek on the 8th, and I used the Tokina 11 to 16 ultra wide to make this photograph of North Chickamauga Creek. But I wasn't done with my Z6. Here is, I love this high key photograph that I made at Harrison Bay State Park in a really foggy morning there. On March the 15th, I used my Z50 and the 105 f2.8 macro lens to make a photograph of this beautiful flower with its pinks and whites and gold. And then this photograph I made at home of this African daisy with my iPhone, of all things. I used a $5 Walmart lamp and a tripod and made this photograph. And then out on the back porch on April 1st, using the Z50, my 500 f4, and a 1.4 teleconverter, I made a photograph of this Carolina chickadee. And then here's a Z50 shot with the macro lens of a wild daisy that was growing on the side of the road that leads to the equestrian trail at Enterprise South Nature Park. I made that shot on April 9th. And then on April the 12th, I made this selfie with the Z50 and the 16 to 50 kit lens And then using the Z50 and the vintage 105 f2.8 that Heather got me for Valentine's Day, I made this photograph on April the 15th of Casey and Ian. On May the 6th, Heather and I went to Lee University to do some photography, and I made this photograph with the Nikon Z6 and the 1973 Minolta 50mm f1.4 vintage lens. And then on the 10th of May, out in Harrison Bay, using the Z50 and the 200 to 500 f5.6, I made a photograph of this turn. Later on May the 18th, using my ultra-wide lens, I made this selfie of myself in the living room with off-camera flash holding my PV Wolfgang guitar. And that night, on the 18th, we went downtown and I used the ultra-wide lens again to make this light trail shot on, I think, Broad Street in Chattanooga of a pinball museum there. Here comes a few of Heather's shots. She made this shot in Blythe Ferry of these beautiful purple-looking clouds on May the 23rd with the Tamron 18 to 400, and she used my Z50 and the 50 to 250 lens to do this off-camera flash shot of a wine glass. We made this in the living room, and this shot she used the D7100 and her 18 to 400 to make a photograph of this beautiful prairie warbler near our house. On the 21st of June, we went down to visit the Wreath of Honor Memorial to the Fallen Five, and I made this photograph with the Nikon Z6 and the 24 to 70 f2.8G. And look at this masterpiece that Heather made using her Tamron 10 to 24 ultra wide on the Nikon D7100. This is one of my favorite photographs by either one of us all year. Here is another beautiful photograph that Heather made with the D7100. This was on the 24th. And look at that beautiful purple sky she captured. Now this year I did more panoramas than I've probably ever done in any single year before. And this was, I believe, 9 shots, 30 seconds each shot, made from the roof of the Chattanooga Choo Choo parking garage looking towards downtown Chattanooga. Really, really love the way this shot came out, and it's definitely one of the best ones of the entire year. I'm not embarrassed to admit that this kind of tasteless photo that I made with the X-T3 in the restroom at the Chattanooga Choo Choo is one of my favorites of the year. Here's a photograph I made with the Z6 and the 24 to 70 looking off of the Walnut Street Bridge. I love this shot because there's a light trail going down the river and there's a firework that happened to be caught in the sky. On July the 8th, we went to the famous sunflower field in Ooltewah, and Heather made this beautiful, beautiful photograph with the Z50 and the 18 to 400 Tamron. And now it's time for a few photographs from our July trip to Walt Disney World. This is from our room in the Riviera Resort looking across, and this panorama is looking over at the Caribbean Beach Resort. Beautiful, beautiful sky that evening. And I was really thrilled to make this panorama with the X-T3 and the 55 to 200 zoom lens. Here's another panorama. This is looking in the opposite direction. This is from Caribbean Beach looking over at the Riviera Resort where the first panorama was made from. This was during Blue Hour, and I was thrilled to be able to make this shot, and I had to kind of sneak over to an area of Walt Disney World that was closed during the time when we were there. Now this next photograph is made at Epcot, at the Epcot Pavilion with the 18 to 55. This is looking from the Japan Pavilion across the lake at Spaceship Earth. And look, who would have thought that this bunny rabbit photograph would have been one of my favorites of the year? But I love the juxtapositioned bunnies with one sharp in focus and the other one nicely bokeh-fied. And now we're back home from Walt Disney World, and this is Heather's photograph she made in the rain with the 18 to 400 of the Blue Rhino on July the 22nd in downtown Chattanooga. Here's a shot I made with the Fujifilm X-T3 and the 18 to 55 of a beautiful cornfield in Sequatchie Valley, Tennessee. I was there for swallowtail kites, but this was my favorite of the day. And here is another panning blur. This is a Z6 shot on August the 9th. I did a lot of panning blurs this year, and I'm sharing the very best ones with you here today. Now this is a shot from the back porch with the Z6, the 500 f4, and the 1.4 teleconverter of a ruby-throated hummingbird. Really love to photograph these. And then here is a photo with the D500, the 500 f4, and the 1.4 teleconverter from August the 23rd of a juvenile osprey in flight. Here is a panorama, a 7-shot panorama with the X-T3 and the 18-55 I made on August the 27th on the Sittons Gulch Trail. Here's a photograph from September the 2nd using the vintage Helios 44-2 lens and an extension tube to make a photograph of a Mexican sunflower bloom. On September 5th, Heather made her first ever panorama photo looking off the top of a parking garage over at both buildings of the Tennessee Aquarium and the Walnut Street pedestrian bridge. Then we went to Knoxville on September the 7th to do some street photography, and here's another panning blur. I thought it was cool that this guy looked over and waved, so I liked this panning blur quite a bit. And Heather made this beautiful photograph of these windows on a brick building that reminds me quite a bit of one of our favorite viewers' work, Richard Young. Then we went on September the 20th to see the elk, and my favorite photograph of the day of mine was this photograph of a creek instead of the elk. Here is Heather's photograph of a beautiful young male elk, and we were really thrilled to see this and hear it make its interesting sounds. On September the 24th, I went back to the area of Harrison Bay where the cypress trees are growing, and now they were in the water. Using the Fuji, I made this shot. And then on October the 1st, I hiked around the Reflection Riding Nature Center in Arboretum and made a photograph of an ambush bug on these beautiful flowers. On October the 3rd, I got the old Helios and the extension tube back out and made photographs of these beautiful yellow flowers that were growing on the side of the road near my neighborhood. And then on October the 8th, I went up onto Signal Mountain near the Rainbow Lake area and made a photograph of Rainbow Lake Falls as it was barely flowing in the fall. And now we are back to Walt Disney World once again. This time I used the Z50 for all the photos, and this is a panorama that I made from Bay Lake Tower looking over at Disney's Contemporary Resort on the right and Bay Lake on the left. And it was really interesting because the sun was setting and the sky was a completely different color depending on which way you looked, and this panorama looks both ways. And now the next morning with the Z50 and the 200-500, I made a photograph of this beautiful blue heron there at the Contemporary Resort Marina. Really happy with the way these shots came out. Here's another shot from that morning. You know, I went to Merritt Island on that same trip, but my favorite bird photos were made right there at Disney's Contemporary Resort Marina. Now we're wandering around, and this is a photograph of the Disney Skyliner with the Epcot France Pavilion in the background. Beautiful shot with the Z50 and the 35 f1.8. Here we are over at Animal Kingdom. And this Animal Kingdom video has 75 animal photos, and I love every single one of them. It was a great day of photography, and that video hasn't been viewed a whole lot, so if you want to see a really good video, watch the Z50 Animal Kingdom video, and I think you'll like it. There's a lot of great photographs. This bird, I have it named in that other video. It's a endangered species that I photographed at Animal Kingdom on that day. Here's a beautiful reflection photograph of a white ibis from that same day. Man, that place is awesome, and I had a great day of photography that day. Lots of photos to share on the Greatest Hits video. This was an endangered species bird here. This photo was made on the Maharaja Jungle Trek. Every single one of the photos from that day at Animal Kingdom were made with the Z50 and the 50-250 kit lens. Does really, really well, and I was really happy to use it that week. Now this is going to Epcot. Here's a photograph I made with that same lens and camera combination at Epcot Pavilion. I love this white flower with the red flowers in the background. And now we're going to switch over. This is with the 35mm f1.8. This is a handheld panorama that I made at Epcot looking across the lake there at the Spaceship Earth, or Epcot Ball as most people call it. Handheld with a lens with no stabilization and a camera with no in-body stabilization, but it can definitely be done. we had a really great trip in October to Walt Disney World. Back home now in Chattanooga, Tennessee, I made this panorama photo on the morning of October 22nd, looking over at the Chickamauga Dam and the Highway 153 bridge that goes across it. I thought the colors in this were absolutely beautiful, and I like the rule of thirds tree there on this 6-shot panorama with the 70 to 210 push-pull zoom lens. And on that same morning, I made this is one of my favorite photos of the year, this black and white photograph of this black vulture sitting on top of a light post with the lake in the background and a garbage can. And now on October the 25th, we went to Chickamauga Battlefield, and Heather made this absolutely beautiful photograph of some fall color and some monuments and some cannons. On the morning of November 5th, I went to Snooper's Rock with the X-T3, and I made this 9-shot panorama just before sunrise with my Tokina 11 to 16 ultra-wide lens. And that night we went downtown, and using the Z50, I did some more practicing of my new favorite kind of photography, or one of my favorites, panning blurs. And I made this panning blur of the gentleman in his Toyota truck, and this really cool panning blur of this sports car as it was cruising through Chattanooga. Then on November the 8th, Heather and I went to Chilhowie Mountain, and we went to the Sugarloaf Overlook, and Heather made this beautiful shot looking over at Parksville Lake, and I made this panorama looking in the same direction. I think the color was a little bit better in Heather's shot, and I wanted to also share this panorama because I just love to make panoramas, and I thought this one was pretty cool. I like this branch on the right hand side that kind of balances the photograph with the more beautiful area on the left hand side. And this particular day was really special because that's 2 photographs already on our favorites, and this is the day that we happened to cross a bald eagle on the way home. So I made this shot with the D500 and the 200 to 500 that I just happened to have in the trunk of the car. On November the 12th, with perfect conditions, David Sailors and I hiked the Sittons Gulch Trail from Trenton to the waterfalls at the base of the Cloudland Canyon State Park. And that picture you just saw was of Sittons Gulch, and this is Daniel Creek right here that came out really well. And then this is a 19-shot 3-row panorama of the waterfall there at Cloudland Canyon State Park. Then on the 19th, Heather and I went on top of a parking garage, and I made this 4-shot exposure blend light trail looking down at Miller Park in downtown Chattanooga. And on the 26th, Heather and I and Casey, we all went to this little trail and creek, and Heather made this beautiful waterfall photograph, and just within 20 yards of there, I made this photograph of this smaller spill with this beautiful mossy tree on the side of the photo. On November the 29th, Heather and I went to Big Soddy Creek in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, and I made this 8-shot panorama from the middle of the creek. I thought it turned out really nice. On December the 3rd, I went to Curtain Pole Road Pond. I was using the Z6 at f5.6 and 700 millimeters with the 500 f4 and the 1.4 teleconverter to make these beautiful duck photographs that morning that I thought turned out really well. Here is a northern shoveler, and look at that frost. On December the 5th, Heather used her Z50 and the 50mm f1.8G to make a portrait of this amazing dog down in Dalton, Georgia. And on December 7th, we went downtown to do some nighttime photography, and Heather used her Tamron 10-24 to make this beautiful photograph of the Walnut Street Bridge. Later that same night, I used the Fuji X-T3 and the 18-55 kit lens to make this crazy 50-second photograph. You'll have to watch the video to see how I did it. On the night of December the 9th, Heather and David Sailors and Ray Soldano and I all hung around UTC and made photographs, and I really love this one that Heather made of Vine Street. The next morning I went to Foster Falls. First time I had ever been there. The place is absolutely beautiful, and I made this lovely photograph with the X-T3 and the 18-55 lens. 1 week later I went to Ozone Falls and made this selfie with the X-T3 and the Tokina 11-16 ultra-wide lens, and then I climbed further up the bank and made this ultra wide shot at 11 millimeters of Ozone Falls and its 110-foot drop from a side view angle. On December 27th, Heather and I went to beautiful Bald River Falls. This 90-foot falls is amazing, and it had snowed. Heather was the only one of us to get a decent shot, and here it is. But I got this shot near the waterfall in a place called Indian Boundary. I thought this beautiful photograph of the road turned out nicely. And then we went down to Tellico Plains to eat lunch, and we stumbled across this beautiful Cooper's Hawk. And I just happened to have the D500 and the 200-500 in the trunk and made this photograph. We thought it would be fun to take a look at how many each of our cameras was used for our favorite photos. Now Heather has not been doing this as long as me, so she has 4 photos with my D7100 and 13 photos with her Z50. For me, I have 29 with my Z6, which I've had the longest, 28 with my Z50, 16 with my X-T3. I brought out my old D500 for 3, my D800 for 1, and my iPhone for 1. Now when you combine them together, you can see that the Z50 has moved to number 1 with 41. Z6 stays the same at 29, X-T3 stays the same at 16, D7100 has 4, my old D500 has 3, the D800 has 1, and not listed here is my iPhone with 1. Okay, thanks for watching our 2020 favorite photos video. 2020's been kind of a crappy year, but Heather and I both had a pretty good year as far as photography is concerned. So I can't wait to see what we do next year. But this year's been really good, and you know, Heather just started and made a lot of really fantastic photos. So just wait to see what she does next year. And stay with us here at the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see some more. And as always, we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.